He hadn't intended to stop. Wade Bennett was just a single father, trying to beat the storm home before the skies turned from threatening to unforgiving. But fate, as it often does, had other plans. And they began with a silhouette, small, soaked, and silent, sitting alone at a forgotten bus stop that hadn't seen a ride in years. In that instant, Wade's life, and hers, shifted forever. The road was barely visible beneath the downpour. Rain didn't fall. It attacked, slicing sideways like it had a personal vendetta. March in Montana was always temperamental, like a wounded animal, unpredictable and unkind. Wade narrowed his eyes as the windshield wipers thrashed uselessly, smearing more than they cleared. Mud sprayed from the tires, the road bending into curves he knew by muscle memory. Every evening for the last 3 years, he'd driven this stretch, ever since he gave up the noise of the city and returned to his roots, the timber-framed house his father had built with rough hands and quiet pride. Life had been simpler since the move. Quieter, at least. That's what he told himself. A half-eaten lunchbox rattled on the passenger seat. His 10-year-old son Jesse had forgotten it again, dreamy-eyed and always distracted, just like his mother used to be. The memory made Wade smile faintly, then fade. That's when he saw her, through the torrent. She was little more than a shape, a figure hunched beneath the sagging roof of a bus shelter that should have been demolished years ago. She didn't move, didn't shiver, didn't look, just sat. As the lightning split the sky, her face flashed into view for a heartbeat, and that was enough. Wade's foot lifted, hesitated above the brake. He told himself to keep driving. Not his business. Maybe she was waiting for someone. Maybe not. But then came another strike of light, and this time he saw her eyes. Not just tired, haunted. That unmistakable 1,000-yard stare soldiers carried when they'd seen too much too soon and had no place left to lay it down. Wade pulled over. The wind tore at his coat as he stepped into the storm. She didn't flinch when he approached. Her face was streaked with rain and strands of wet hair. Her military duffel hugged tightly to her chest. A backpack, Army issue, worn, stained, but cared for. "Ma'am," Wade called softly, careful not to startle her. "You all right?" Her eyes rose slowly, warily. Green, guarded, as if assessing threat levels even now. "I'm fine," she rasped. "Just waiting for the bus." "There hasn't been a bus on this road in 3 years," he said gently. She blinked. No panic, no anger, just resignation, settling onto her like another layer of soaked clothing. "Been here a while," she said. Wade glanced down the road, empty and endless, then back at her. "I've got a warm truck," he offered, "and dry coffee, if you don't mind it burnt. Name's Wade. I'm not a creep." A ghost of a smile flickered across her lips, or maybe just a twitch. "You don't look like one." "That's comforting," he replied, tipping his hat. Then, with a calm that didn't leave room for argument, he added, "You're coming with me." She hesitated. That backpack tightened in her grasp as if it held something precious. Wade reached for it instinctively, but she drew back fast, protective. "I've got it," she said firmly. He didn't argue, just opened the passenger door and waited. Back home, Jesse's muddy sneakers were by the door, forgotten again after school. The scent of damp pine wood, old coffee, and something older, memory, perhaps, welcomed them inside. Wade helped her hang her drenched coat. She moved like someone used to hiding, avoiding his eyes, shoulders tense. "You can warm up by the stove," he said, motioning to the old cast iron fireplace, glowing amber in the corner. She nodded once, set her pack down with reverent care, and moved toward the fire. Wade watched the way her fingers brushed the pack, like it was fragile or sacred, or both. "What's your name?" he asked after a moment. She paused, guarded again. "Claire. Claire Monroe." He offered her a clean mug. "Nice to meet you, Claire. How do you take your coffee?" With silence, she murmured, then caught herself. "Sorry, that was—" "It's all right," he said, smiling gently. "I prefer mine that way, too." She sipped, slow and measured. Her hands were steady, but her eyes were not. They flicked toward every creak and shadow like echoes from a past still too close behind. Wade didn't push. He simply sipped beside her. The rain hammered the roof. The fire popped. And for a moment, the silence wasn't empty. It was safe. "You didn't have to stop," Claire said at last, voice nearly lost in the wind. "No," Wade replied, gaze steady on hers. "But I wanted to." For the first time, she really looked at him. And for the first time, someone truly saw her. Not a soldier. Not a problem to solve. Just a person. A woman. Tired. Brave. Real. Morning crept in quiet shades of gray. The storm had passed, but a low mist coiled around the hills like the breath of something ancient. Wade stood at the kitchen window, sipping burnt coffee, the kind he always drank. Behind him, the house was still. Too still. Claire's door was closed, but not fully. As he walked past to grab his boots, the door stood ajar, just a sliver. And in that small view, he saw her, curled on top of the bed, fully clothed, clutching the backpack like it was a lifeline, as if letting go might shatter what little remained. Wade froze. That image, her form hunched in sleep, arm wrapped protectively around something unseen, hit him harder than he expected. He'd seen this before. In brothers and friends, in his father. The way war didn't always end when the uniform came off. He backed away quietly. Healing didn't come with a schedule, especially not for someone stitched together with silence and survival. Claire awoke to the scent of eggs and toast. The room was unfamiliar. Too warm. Too still. For a second, she panicked, then remembered. The rain. The road. The man in the cowboy hat, who didn't ask questions, just offered a place to land. She checked the backpack. Still closed. Still undisturbed. Still safe. In the kitchen, Wade stood at the stove, turning something in the skillet. He didn't look at her right away. "Hope you like eggs," he said casually. "Didn't take you for the oatmeal type." She hovered in the doorway, uncertain. "You don't have to talk," he added, his voice easy. "But you should eat. I reckon you're not made of stone." That coaxed the faintest curve to her lips. She sat. He placed a plate in front of her, eggs, toast, a slice of ham. Simple, hot, and made without strings. They ate in silence, not awkward, but the kind of quiet shared between people who were still learning how to breathe around each other. Then Wade asked, soft as smoke, "Your little one okay?" Claire froze. "I didn't look," he said, not apologetic, just honest. "Didn't need to. I saw the way you held that pack." A long pause stretched out between them, taut and trembling. Then she whispered, "Her name's Sophie." "Pretty name," Wade said. "She's for—" Claire nodded. "She's different. Needs more than I can always give." He didn't flinch, didn't blink. "She asleep?" he asked gently. "In the pack. It's the only way she stays calm in new places." "You're safe here," Wade said, voice solid like timber. "No one's going to come knocking to push you out." She stared at him, startled by the certainty. "Why?" she asked, almost daring him. "Because I've had my own nights holding too tight to the only thing I had left," he said, eyes on his coffee. "And maybe it's time someone held back for a change." Claire looked away fast, but not before he saw the tremble in her jaw. Later, as Wade washed dishes, he heard a soft flutter of sound. Claire had moved to the living room. She had laid a blanket down, and with infinite care, lifted Sophie into the sunlight. There she was, tiny, pale, wearing a knit cap. A tube curled gently from her chest. Her small hands moved through the air like she was touching dreams only she could see. Claire brushed Sophie's hair back with trembling fingers. "She loves the sun," she said softly. "Even if she can't say it, she feels it." Wade stood quietly behind him. "You both do," he said. "Belong in the light. And if you'd like, part of this home too." Claire hadn't planned to stay. She was used to disappearing. Shelters, church basements, hospital rooms. She'd become an expert in leaving before the kindness grew roots. But in that morning light, with Sophie asleep beneath a patch of warmth and a stranger who hadn't asked for anything standing quietly nearby. Something changed. She stayed. And sometimes, that's how miracles begin. Claire felt something she hadn't in what seemed like a lifetime: stillness. Not the kind born from emptiness or isolation, but the rare, fragile quiet that comes with being safe. There was no urgency to pack up and go. No dread of being asked to leave. No eyes watching for her to justify her presence. Just the rhythmic creak of Wade Bennett's boots on old wooden floorboards, the soft ticking of the worn-out clock above the stove, and the steady breathing in the room, hers and Sophie's. And that last one mattered most. Wade had seen many things across the arc of his life. Some were beautiful in their purity, others brutal in their unforgiving edges. But nothing had prepared him for the moment he laid eyes on Sophie. She was impossibly small for a child of 4, her limbs as delicate as reeds, dressed in faded pink pajamas, with fraying cuffs. A thin oxygen tube curved gently across her chest, connected to a humming compressor tucked discreetly inside the military backpack Claire guarded like treasure. She looked like she was made of porcelain and breath. Fragile, ethereal. Wade had paused in the doorway, coffee cooling in his hands. Claire was kneeling beside her daughter, both her hands wrapped gently around Sophie's tiny one. She didn't notice him at first. She was whispering a lullaby, slow and sweet, the kind mothers carry in their bones and murmur without thinking. Her voice was softer than anything Wade had yet heard from her, softer than her guarded replies, her apology-laced conversations, her defensive tones. This was love distilled. When Claire finally glanced up, their eyes met. She didn't flinch or pull away. She just said simply, "She gets tired fast, even just lying down." Wade stepped closer, cautious not to disrupt the sacred moment. His eyes never left Sophie. "She's beautiful." Claire's throat tightened. No one had said that in so long, not without a quiet undertone of pity, of disbelief, of sadness. But Wade's voice held none of that. No apology, no hesitation, just admiration, as if Sophie was a miracle, not a tragedy. "She has cerebral palsy," Claire said softly, her words worn with repetition. "Needs oxygen, speech therapy, gross motor delays, the whole list." "She doesn't look broken," Wade murmured, crouching beside them. Claire blinked fast. "She's not," she said, her voice fierce now. "She's just fragile, but strong too, stronger than I ever was." Wade looked at her then, not just glanced, looked, really saw her. "I don't know," he said gently. "You're the one carrying her and that pack through a storm in the middle of nowhere." Claire's lips quivered in a smile. "The pack was my idea. I couldn't bear to leave her behind, not even to use the bathroom. People stare sometimes. Some pity us. Some whisper. But the worst, they look away, like she's invisible." "She's not," Wade said, his voice steady, as sure as the walls around them. "Not in this house." That evening, Wade prepared the guest room. It wasn't much, faded wallpaper from a decade past, a creaky dresser with missing knobs, and a window that stuck in the corner, but it was private, safe. He laid out a twin mattress on the floor for Sophie, low enough for Claire's ease, and added a small reading lamp in case she ever wanted to read bedtime stories. It was a quiet act of care. No flourish, no declarations. As Claire stood in the doorway, Sophie nestled against her shoulder, asleep and heavy with the weight of her day. Her arms ached, and her knees trembled. But she didn't complain. She hadn't let herself in years. Wade didn't hover. He didn't reach for Sophie or offer grand gestures. He just said, "Sleep here, as long as you need. No strings." Claire hesitated. "I don't know how long that'll be." "I'm not counting," he replied. Simple. Final. Later that night, Claire woke to the sound of Sophie coughing, a sharp, gasping sound that jolted her out of the warm cocoon of exhaustion. Her body moved before thought, checking the oxygen tube, feeling for pulse, rocking gently until Sophie's breathing slowed. It was a ritual etched into her, like muscle memory. She didn't notice Wade standing in the doorway until he cleared his throat quietly. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, he said, holding a glass of water. Just heard her cough. Claire exhaled, still half in panic. It happens when she's cold or scared. Do you need anything? He asked. She hesitated, her voice thin. A night without fear. Wade gave her a small, sad smile. I can't promise the world, but I can promise this. No one's going to hurt you. Or her. Not here. Claire looked at him, not in disbelief, but in something more dangerous. Asterisk hope. Asterisk, and that was what terrified her most. Believing it might be true. The next morning, Jesse finally met Sophie. He barreled into the kitchen like a whirlwind, hair wild, shirt crooked, a comic book in one hand and toast in the other. His eyes widened when he saw Claire at the table, and Sophie curled up in a bean bag beside her. Whoa, he whispered. Who's the princess? Claire froze, unsure how to correct him gently. She's not, she began, but Jesse interrupted. Yes, she is. Look at her crown, he said, pointing at Sophie's wool cap. That's definitely a magic hat. Wade hid a grin behind his coffee. Jesse turned to Claire with pure, unfiltered enthusiasm. Can she play dragons with me when she wakes up? Claire's voice cracked a little. She doesn't really walk. Or talk. Not like most kids. Jesse shrugged. So, I talk enough for two. And with that, he plopped down beside Sophie and began drawing on a napkin with crayons, chatting as if he'd known her forever. Claire had to excuse herself. In the hallway, one hand pressed to the wall, she finally let go, not from fear or grief, but from being overwhelmed by a kindness so deep it cracked the armor she'd worn for years. Wade stood beside her silently. Sometimes, he said, the best parts of the world are 10 years old and don't know what judgment means. Claire nodded, shoulders trembling. I don't know what we're walking into, she whispered. But for the first time, I don't want to run. Claire had never made pancakes before, not the kind that sizzled golden in a cast-iron skillet while a sleepy boy hummed off-key at the table, not the kind served with real maple syrup and laughter that echoed off farmhouse beams. She stood at Wade's stove, wearing his borrowed flannel, hair tied in a messy knot, feeling strangely domestic, and not entirely unwelcome. Sophie was wrapped in a quilt by the window, soaking in morning sunlight, her face relaxed, quiet, eyes wide as Jesse animatedly explained how dinosaurs could have survived the Ice Age with mittens. Claire flipped a pancake and tried not to laugh. You're not bad at that, Wade remarked behind her. She arched an eyebrow. You expected me to be? Well, considering you tried to open the coffee canister with a whisk yesterday. She rolled her eyes. Keep that to yourself, Bennett. I wouldn't dare. They ate together, Wade, Jesse, Claire, and Sophie, like it was the most ordinary, extraordinary thing in the world. Claire fed Sophie soft bites, dipping each in syrup and wiping her mouth with care. And Wade noticed. Claire's hands never shook when caring for her daughter. That was when she seemed most rooted, most alive. Jesse took 3 pancakes, then came back for a 4th, declaring them mom-level good. For him, that was the highest praise. The word mom hit Claire like a pebble skipping across a still lake. She hadn't heard it in years, not directed at her. Not since Sophie was a baby and her husband still alive. It stirred something buried deep within. Later, as Wade and Jesse cleared plates, Claire pulled a square of colored paper from her duffel, one of the last remnants from a therapy session at the VA hospital. With precise folds, she shaped it into a crane. What's that? Jesse asked, curious. A crane, Claire replied. In Japan, they say if you fold 1,000, your wish comes true. Did it work? I don't know. I never made it past 300. Maybe you didn't wish hard enough, Jesse said matter-of-factly. Will you teach me? Claire blinked. You want to learn origami? I want to fold wishes. They sat folding together, mother, boy, daughter resting in sunlight, and Wade watched from the kitchen, heart full. Something was forming here. Not loud, not sudden, but real. That evening, Claire stepped out onto the porch. The sun was setting. casting golden hues across the field. She held a chipped mug of tea untouched. Behind her, Jessie read aloud to Sophie, roaring like a dragon while she giggled. Wade joined her, sitting quietly beside her on the steps. "Your boy's something else," she said. "He's his mother's son," Wade replied. She had that kind of light, too, the kind the world can't dim for long. Claire lowered her gaze. "You don't talk about her much." "I do, when it matters." After a pause, Claire said, "When my husband died overseas, I didn't just lose him. I lost my family, too. They said I brought it on myself. Chose war over motherhood. Said God noticed." Wade's jaw clenched. "I'm not a religious man," he said, "but I don't believe in a God who punishes women for being brave." Claire looked at him, surprised. There was no judgment in his face, just truth. "I don't want to be a burden," she whispered. "You're not. I don't know how long we'll stay." "You don't have to." She stared at him, eyes open in a way they hadn't been before. "What are you, Wade Bennett? Some kind of saint?" He chuckled. "Far from it. Just someone who knows what it means when someone doesn't walk away." That night, Jessie strung paper cranes across the mantel. Claire helped him tie them, Sophie watching from the rug, eyes following the colors like they were magic. "What's the wish?" Wade asked. Jessie smiled. "That this stays." Claire turned to Wade, and for the first time, truly smiled. A full, radiant, unguarded smile. The kind that says, "I might be learning how to live again." Claire didn't look at Wade when he asked a question. She couldn't. The walls she'd spent years building inside herself weren't ready to fall. Not yet. Let people in. Trust again. Those weren't simple things. They were dangerous. Wade took a long, thoughtful sip of coffee, the steam curling between them like a question neither of them had the nerve to fully speak. "I don't think it's about trust," he finally said, his voice low and even. "It's about need. After a while, even the most stubborn hearts get tired of hearing their own echo." Claire's fingers tightened around the chipped ceramic mug in her hands. Her eyes stayed fixed on the field stretching wide before them. "Sometimes I still sleep in my boots," she admitted softly, her voice so quiet the wind almost stole it away. "It's stupid, I know. But there's this fear that if I let myself rest, if I let my guard down even for a second, someone's going to show up and say, 'Time's up, Monroe.' Back to the sidewalk." Wade turned to look at her, his voice nearly a whisper. "That ever happen?" She nodded, not blinking. "Twice. Once outside a shelter in Kansas. I fell asleep sitting against the wall, Sophie in my arms. They woke me with a flashlight to the face. Gave me a citation for loitering." Her jaw tightened. The second time was in a church basement in Phoenix. A volunteer told me Sophie's equipment was a liability, and we had to leave before the other families arrived. Wade's jaw clenched hard. "That's cruel." Claire shrugged slightly, eyes still watching the horizon. "I don't think people mean to be cruel. I think they just don't know what to do with you when your pain doesn't look like theirs." Wade knew something about that. Most of his scars were invisible, tucked beneath calloused skin and an easy smile. He'd once been a man who laughed easily, lived brightly. A husband, a father, a man with a full home and a full heart. He met Erin in college. She was all spark and warmth, the kind of woman whose laugh filled rooms and whose mind could slice through arguments like a blade. A schoolteacher with fire in her belly and love in her hands. Jessie had come 5 years into their marriage, a miracle made of mischief and wide-eyed wonder. Then the coughing started. Then came the appointments, the fatigue that lingered, and finally, the diagnosis that split their world down the middle. Stage 4. Terminal. Wade had stayed, quietly, fiercely, through every treatment, every sleepless night, every moment of fading light. And when she was gone, silence swallowed everything. He filled his days with Jessie's school runs, hardware store ledgers, and chores that gave his hands something to do so his heart wouldn't break. He hadn't let anyone in since, not because he didn't want to, but because the risk of losing again was a kind of pain he didn't think he could survive twice. Then Claire came. She wasn't Erin. Claire was edges where Erin had been open, quiet where Erin had been bold. But there was something in her, a strength Wade recognized. Not the kind that roars, but the kind that stands tall in the storm. That never stops carrying what must be carried. That survives. It wasn't pity that drew him to her. Not even attraction, not at first. It was recognition. That night, after Jesse and Sophie had fallen asleep, Wade brought out an old wooden box, worn smooth with age. He set it gently on the kitchen table and slid a photo across to Claire. She picked it up with careful hands. The woman in the picture had sun-kissed skin and honey-colored hair. She was laughing, holding a small boy, Jesse, in her arms, both mid-spin on a picnic blanket. "She looks like Joy," Claire murmured. "She was," Wade said. Claire studied the image, eyes lingering. Was it hard, letting her go? Wade didn't answer immediately. He stared into the dark window, his reflection ghosted beside hers. "It was harder letting go of the life we built," he said quietly. The inside jokes. "The way she poured cream in my coffee, without asking. You don't just lose a person. You lose the part of yourself that only existed because they saw it." Claire blinked fast. "That's exactly it." They sat in silence, their griefs folding together like prayer hands. "And you?" Wade asked gently. Claire hesitated. "Ben," she said, the name breaking softly over her lips. "My husband. We served together. Same unit in Syria. I was medevac. He was logistics. We got married under a tarp on base. 2 witnesses and a borrowed Bible." She took a breath that didn't quite steady her. "When I got pregnant, we both requested reassignment. Stateside. But there was a supply run and ambush. I made it out. Barely. Shrapnel in my shoulder." Her eyes grew distant. "Ben didn't make it out at all." Wade reached across the table, instinctively. Claire flinched, then slowly let him rest his hand over hers. "Sophie was born a month later," she whispered. "Too soon. Too small. She spent 6 weeks in the NICU. I sat outside the glass every day, praying to a God I wasn't sure I believed in anymore." Wade didn't say anything. He just squeezed her hand, and it was enough. "I don't know what brought you to that bus stop," he said finally, "but I thank God or fate, or dumb luck, that I happened to be passing by." Her voice trembled. "Why?" "Because I think you and I both needed a place to land." Claire couldn't sleep that night. She stood beside Sophie's bed, watching her small chest rise and fall beneath the gentle hum of her oxygen machine. She hummed old lullabies into the darkness and let silence stretch between verses. Eventually, she wandered to the window. The stars above Montana were closer than anywhere else she'd ever been. They burned like tiny promises, sharp and real. She didn't believe in signs, but she believed in Wade's voice when he told her, "You're not broken." She believed in Jesse's paper cranes and Sophie's laughter, in the way her hands no longer trembled when someone touched her shoulder. Maybe this wasn't just a place to land. Maybe it was the start of a return. Spring in Montana was a tricky thing. It could feel like rebirth one day and betrayal the next. That week, the weather shifted. A bitter wind rolled in. Low clouds hung heavy over the hills, and the air felt thick with something unspoken. Wade was away early, helping a neighbor fix a tractor axle. Jesse and Sophie played board games in the living room. Dragons versus knights, monsters versus mischief. Claire stood in the kitchen, stirring soup with one hand, adjusting Sophie's feeding schedule with the other. She heard the doorbell ring. Not a knock. A bell. Sharp. Too official. Her heart tightened. In her world, doorbells didn't mean apple pies or warm welcomes. They meant questions, demands, papers to sign and decisions she had no control over. She wiped her hands on a towel and approached slowly. Through the window, she saw a clean-cut man, clipboard in hand, posture stiff, a government shape. Her stomach sank. She opened the door just a crack. "Can I help you?" she asked, tone flat. "Good morning," the man said, forced smile in place. "Grant Lewis. Child Services. I've been contacted by a local resident. Concerns about a child with visible medical needs living in an unlicensed care setting." Claire's blood ran cold. "She's my daughter," she said evenly. I'm her mother. I understand, he replied. May I come in? No. He blinked. Ma'am, I just want to ensure the child is safe. She's safe. Her voice didn't waver now. Behind her, Sophie coughed. A small, precisely timed sound. Grant's eyes narrowed. Ma'am, I know what it's like to feel cornered. No, Claire said sharp. You don't. You don't know what it's like to sleep in church basements. To be turned away because your child needs a feeding tube. You don't know what it's like to watch strangers stare at your baby like she's a burden. He tried again, but Claire didn't let him finish. Unless you have a warrant, I suggest you leave. She stepped back inside and closed the door without waiting. When Wade returned, he found her sitting on the edge of the porch, arms folded tightly across her chest, like she was trying to hold herself together with force alone. What happened? He asked gently. Claire didn't lift her head. Someone reported us. What do you mean? Child Services. A complaint. Said there's a disabled child in a non-licensed home. Her voice was hollow. Translation. Someone in town doesn't like that I exist. Wade sat beside her, slow and steady. Did they see Sophie? No. I didn't let them. Good. Claire turned to him, her face trembling between fury and fear. Wade, if they come back with a court order, I could lose her. They'll call me unstable, homeless, unemployed, whatever they need. She's medically dependent. I have no permanent address. You're not homeless, he said firmly. You live here. Now, I can't put that on you. You didn't. I opened that door. I asked you to stay. You and Sophie belong here, not just because it's safe, but because we want you here. Her voice cracked. And what if Jesse's school hears about this? What if the neighbors? Let them, he said, eyes kind but fierce. You've been running so long you forgot what it feels like to stand still. But you're not alone now. Not this time. That night, Claire couldn't sleep. The shadows loomed too long. Every sound made her reach for her boots. She held Sophie close, whispering reassurances even her own voice didn't believe. Then, quietly, Jesse appeared. Barefoot, in pajamas, something in his hands. I made this, he said, holding out a paper crane, folded from a page of his math notebook. I wrote a wish inside, he said proudly. Claire opened it carefully. I wish Miss Claire and Sophie stay forever. Her chest cracked wide. You really want us to stay? She whispered. Yeah, Jesse said. Dad makes better pancakes when you're around. The next morning, Wade sat on the porch sipping coffee as the sun stretched over the field. I'm staying, Claire said before he could speak. He smiled without turning. I was hoping you would. But I want to earn it, she added. Let me cook, clean, do the books, anything. I don't want to just take your kindness. You don't owe me anything. I know, she said. That's why I want to give back. He turned to her, eyes soft. You already are. It started with a nail. Claire was fixing a loose step on the porch, hammer tucked in her back pocket, sleeves rolled up. The sun had finally returned after days of gray, and with it came a restlessness she couldn't ignore. She needed to build something. Something real. Something lasting. Wade leaned in the doorway, coffee in hand, watching her work with quiet awe. I was going to get to that today, he said. Claire glanced up. Too late. I beat you to it. He laughed. At this rate, I'll run out of things to fix, and excuses to come check on you. She smirked, but didn't answer. She didn't need to. Not anymore. Inside, Jesse and Sophie had turned the kitchen into a papier-mâché battlefield. And for the first time in a very long time, Claire Monroe didn't feel like a guest. She felt like home. Jesse sat at the dining room table surrounded by glue sticks, baking soda, vinegar, and a precariously taped papier-mâché volcano. With solemn dedication, he sculpted his imaginary disaster, all while explaining to Sophie, in great detail, how it would erupt and destroy the tiny clay village beside it. Sophie, in her way, joined the chaos. Her small hands pressed shapes into the village, fingerprints that told stories only she could tell. Her eyes twinkled with mischief, and when Jessie laughed, she hummed back, not words, not even a song, just vibrations of joy wrapped in breath. Claire had become fluent in Sophie's language. The flicker of an eyelid, the flick of her wrist, the soft sound she made when pleased or perturbed. Every expression was a poem, and lately, miraculously, those poems had grown longer, more frequent, alive with meaning. Since they'd arrived at Wade's place, something in Sophie had changed. She'd begun to hum in the mornings. She reached out toward light. She watched. It was subtle, but it was hope, and Claire felt it like a pulse in the quiet. Later that afternoon, Claire and Wade drove into town together. Just 15 minutes of open road, framed with towering pines and cottonwoods, led to a speck of civilization, one dusty gas station, a diner that smelled of bacon and coffee, a post office with a crooked flag, and a hardware store that doubled as everything else. Claire hadn't been back since the knock from child services. Wade had offered to go alone, but she shook her head. "I'm not hiding," she said. "Not anymore." They walked side by side down Main Street. People looked. Some nodded, polite and distant. Others let their curiosity show. Claire held her head high anyway. Sophie and Jessie remained in the back seat. A note taped inside the window in Jessie's loopy handwriting. "Asterisk, we're just like you. We're just trying, asterisk." At the diner, Mary Jean, the woman who'd served lunch there for 3 decades, offered Claire a tight smile. "Glad you're still around." Claire smiled back, but the tightness in her chest didn't loosen until they were halfway home. Wade noticed. "Let 'em talk," he said. "Some folks only know how to move their mouths." "I don't care what they say about me," Claire murmured. "I care what Sophie hears, what Jessie sees, what it teaches them." "You're protecting them," Wade said gently. "Just don't forget, they're learning how you stand, too, not just what you stand against." That evening, Wade found Claire in his father's old workshop, the one that smelled of cedar and oil and ghosted with the past. She was seated on a stool, sanding a weathered piece of wood with slow, deliberate strokes. Her sleeves were rolled. Her jaw was tight. "You're supposed to be resting," Wade teased, leaning against the doorframe. "I don't rest well," she replied. "What are you making?" Claire paused, then flipped the board around. The carving was rough, clearly done by hand, but the letters were careful, honest. Sophie, spelled out in imperfect beauty. A named sign for her daughter's room. Wade crossed the room and sat beside her. "I thought you said you didn't know how to stay," he said softly. "I don't," Claire whispered. "But every time I pack our bags lately, something in me breaks." She turned to face him fully, for the first time that night. "I'm tired of running, Wade." He brushed a curl of sawdust from her cheek. "Then don't." Her breath caught. "I don't want to take your kindness for granted." "You're not," he said. "You're answering it." The very next day, Sophie's room became hers, really hers. The walls were painted a buttery yellow Jessie chose, because it looks like sunlight. Wade built low, sturdy shelves for Sophie's books and toys. Claire hung a mobile maid of paper cranes above the bed, each one folded with steady fingers and strung with fishing line, so they'd dance in the breeze. The whole space shimmered with care. That night, Claire read from Charlotte's Web in a whisper so soft it barely stirred the air. Sophie didn't need to speak. Her eyes were wide, her hand curled around Claire's, and for the first time in months, she drifted into sleep without needing to be held. Claire stayed there long after, just watching her daughter breathe. Downstairs, Wade poured 2 glasses of wine. Claire joined him on the porch, a sweater draped over her shoulders, the stars winking overhead. "You made this place feel like home," Wade said. Claire shook her head. "It's still yours." "No," Wade said, looking at her. "I think it was always waiting for you." They sat in silence, the kind that held space rather than filled it. Then Claire whispered, "Do you think broken people can build something whole together?" Wade turned to her. "I don't think there's any other way." The knock came on a slow, honeyed Sunday morning. The house smelled like cinnamon muffins and percolating coffee. Wade and Jessie were elbow-deep in the old radio, chasing a jazz station. Sophie sat at the kitchen table coloring, her small fingers moving with focused grace. Then came the sound. 3 knocks. Not frantic, not familiar, deliberate. Claire froze, a tray of muffins in hand. "I'll get it," Wade said, already rising. "No," Claire stepped in front of him. "It's for me." He paused, his hand resting near her elbow. There she needed it. Claire opened the door. There on the porch stood a man in uniform, army green jacket, sun-leathered skin, stubble shadowing a familiar jaw. His frame was leaner, his eyes the same steel gray she remembered from childhood. "Claire," he said, his voice cracking, "it's really you." Her knees almost gave out. "Luke," she breathed. He nodded. "I didn't know where to find you. Someone at the VA mentioned you'd been through Montana. I've been looking for months." Luke Monroe, her half-brother, 6 years gone. Their last words had been shouted across a military hangar. Anger, betrayal, hurt. She had enlisted against their father's wishes. Luke had gone first, Marine Corps. 2 tours. Then silence. A classified mission. Mia, presumed dead. No closure. Just his name on a wall and a sister who mourned in private. "How are you alive?" Claire whispered. Luke looked down, voice hoarse. "Medical facility. Memory loss. TBI. I didn't even remember my name for a while. Then I started dreaming about you. Your name kept showing up in the fog." She reached out, her fingers trembling. He caught her in a hug that wasn't graceful. It was clumsy and gasping and desperate and real. Inside, Wade guided Jessie and Sophie to the other room, giving Claire space to unravel and reform. 15 minutes later, Claire returned. Her cheeks were flushed, her hands wringing the hem of her shirt. Luke followed, scanning the room, the photos, the little signs of life. "This is Wade," Claire said, voice steadier now. "That's Jessie." And she turned toward the hallway. Sophie peeked out, half curious, half shy. Luke's voice softened. "Is that?" Claire nodded. "Your niece." Luke knelt. "Hi, Sophie. I'm Uncle Luke. You don't know me yet, but I've known about you for a very long time." Sophie tilted her head, then slowly reached toward the wall, peeking from behind it. Tears pressed behind Claire's eyes. It wasn't the reunion she'd imagined. It was Messier. Softer. Real. Over lunch, the 5 of them gathered around the table like they'd done it 100 times. Luke spoke in fragments, about rehab, the gaps in his memory, the guilt that followed him like a second shadow, about chasing Claire's name across states, hoping to find something true. "I don't know if I deserve to be here," he said, watching Sophie nibble on banana slices. "But I want to know her, and I want to know you." Claire reached across the table and placed her hand over his. "You're already here." That night, under the wide Montana sky, Claire stood beside Wade on the porch. She leaned against the railing, her body looser than it had been in days. "I thought I buried him," she said. "I mourned a ghost." "And now?" Wade asked. She looked at him, eyes glistening. "Now I get a second chance." "It's scary," she added, "how much I still love people who left." "They didn't all leave," Wade said. "Some just took a little longer to find their way back." She turned toward him, the porch light painting gold across her cheek. "I don't know what comes next." "You don't have to," he whispered. "You just have to stay." She didn't answer with words. She stepped closer until their shoulders touched. The sun rose the next morning bold and unapologetic, flooding the farmhouse with golden light that reached into corners long left cold. Claire stood at the sink, elbows deep in soapy water, smiling as steam curled upward. Luke was asleep in the guest room. She still half expected to wake and find him gone, but every time she passed the door, she remembered. He was real. In the living room, Jessie and Sophie were sprawled on a quilt playing a board game, the marshmallows having become unofficial currency. Jessie, full of flair, announced moves with wild voices. "Your unicorn has reached the lava moat. What's your move, Lady Sophie?" Sophie didn't reply, but she smiled, and that was everything. Claire pressed a hand to her heart. This was the life she never dared dream of. Not glamorous or easy, but soft, safe, whole. That afternoon, Jesse had a surprise. "I've been planning this for weeks," he declared. "But we needed sunshine. Today's perfect." He led everyone into the backyard where, beneath the sycamore tree, a table had been set with cardboard cake, lopsided paper plates, and a hand-painted sign, "Happy Sophie Day." Claire blinked. "What is this?" "We missed her birthday last month." Jesse shrugged. "So I figured why not now?" Wade followed with cupcakes. Luke, with a Bluetooth speaker humming soft tunes. Sophie, bundled in a sweater, squealed when she saw the sign. She clapped, reached toward Jesse, her eyes alight. Claire knelt, stunned. "You did this for her?" "For both of you," Jesse said. "She deserves a party. And so do you." Claire didn't cry right then. She waited until the sparklers fizzled out, until frosting was smeared on cheeks, until Luke whispered, "You've built something beautiful here, kid. You're not surviving anymore. You're living." Later, as twilight settled and laughter softened into memory, Wade pulled a guitar from the porch. "I didn't know you played," Claire said. "I don't," he replied, smiling. "Not well." And then, under a sky filled with stars and second chances, he played anyway. "I never really played," Wade said with a quiet shrug, the firelight warming his face. "But Aaron used to sing. I just played enough to keep up." He settled onto an old wooden crate beneath the sycamore, guitar in hand, fingers hesitant but steady. The melody he strummed was raw, slightly clumsy, worn at the edges, but there was something more powerful than skill behind it. Sincerity. Something purer than perfection. Claire sat cross-legged in the cool grass beside Sophie's chair. Luke leaned back against the tree trunk, arms folded over his chest, eyes shut, listening with a soldier's stillness. Jesse lay belly down in the grass, humming along like he already knew the words. Wade sang low, steady, like a secret only the stars were meant to hear. Asterisk, you don't need to ask the wind where it's going, or teach the river where to bend. Sometimes the heart just needs to follow, and trust it'll find its home again. Asterisk. Claire didn't even realize her hand had found Wade's until she felt his thumb gently brush across her knuckles. They didn't say anything. They didn't need to. That night, as Claire tucked Sophie beneath her soft quilt, the little girl reached up and gently touched her mother's cheek. Her fingers brushed away a tear Claire hadn't known she was crying. "Thank you," Claire whispered, "for staying, for choosing me, over and over again." Sophie blinked, her eyes heavy with sleep. She didn't understand all the words, but she understood the rhythm of love beneath them. Claire kissed her daughter's forehead, then stood, leaving the door cracked open, just enough for the hallway light to spill in like hope. Downstairs, the kitchen was dim and quiet. Wade sat at the table, a second mug of tea steeping across from him. Claire slid into the chair without a word. They sat together in silence, two people made of too many pasts and just enough courage to keep showing up. Finally, Claire spoke. "I've always been waiting for the next storm," she said softly. "Every good thing in my life, it's ended too soon." Wade nodded. "Me too. But today," she looked at him. "Today felt different." "It was," he said. "Why do you think that is?" "Because today," Wade replied, reaching across the table to take her hand, "you didn't just let it happen. You chose to be part of it, and we chose you back." Claire's fingers tightened around his. "Do you think this could be real?" she asked. "I think," Wade said, "it already is." Outside, the sky had opened. Not just the clouds, but something deeper. The stars shimmered above the roofline like tiny, flickering promises. A soft wind swept through the grass beyond the porch, as if it were carrying the whispered prayers of someone who once didn't believe they had the right to ask for more. In the hallway, a string of paper cranes swayed gently, Jesse's handiwork, and Claire, watching them dance, realized something she hadn't dared believe before. She wasn't passing through someone else's story anymore. She was home. The rain returned one evening, slow and deliberate, tapping the kitchen window like a quiet reminder. Peace, like weather, is always temporary. Everyone else had gone to bed. Claire sat at the table, hands folded, a blank sheet of paper before her. Only the occasional creak of the house and the faint hum of Sophie's oxygen machine in the next room broke the stillness. Something had been stirring inside her for weeks now, unknowing. Not dread, not sorrow, just the weight of truth. She understood something all too well. Nothing was promised. Not permanence, not safety, not love. She had learned that even the things we cherish most could vanish in a moment. So she wrote, "To whoever finds this, if you're reading it, it means I'm not here to say this out loud. Maybe I left. Maybe I had no choice. Maybe my fear caught up to me. Either way, there's something I need you to know. Sophie is not a burden. She is not fragile. She is not less. She is the strongest soul I've ever known. If she cries, hold her. If she laughs, laugh louder. And if you are lucky enough to feel her fall asleep in your arms, know you are holding the most sacred thing I've ever loved." To Jessie, thank you. You reminded her that friendship doesn't ask questions, and that different doesn't mean broken. To Wade, there are not enough words, but here are the ones that matter. You gave us more than shelter. You gave us dignity, a place to exhale, a home. If I could ask one thing, it's this. Let her keep the cranes. Let her believe in paper wishes. And please, tell her she was never a mistake. She was the one beautiful thing I brought back from war. Love, Claire. She folded the letter and slipped it under the salt shaker on the kitchen table, hidden, but not lost. Then she sat back and watched the rain blur the edges of the world. Wade found her at dawn. He had woken early, heart uneasy. Something in the quiet had whispered to him that Claire hadn't slept. He entered the kitchen to find her still at the table, eyes open, hands clenched, the envelope untouched. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked gently. Claire shook her head. "I was thinking." He poured her coffee without asking and sat down across from her. "You ever feel like something so good it can't last?" she asked, her eyes on the envelope. "All the time," Wade said, "but I've learned something." She looked up. "It's not about making it last forever," he said. "It's about being brave enough to believe it's real. Asterisk while you have it starred." Claire slid the envelope across the table. Wade placed a hand over it. "I'm not going to read this," he said quietly, "unless you disappear." Her voice cracked. "And if I do, then I'll read it once, and I'll keep it forever. But I'd rather never have to read it at all." Her shoulders trembled. "I don't know how to stop preparing for the worst." "You don't have to," Wade said, "but maybe you can also start preparing for the best." Later that morning, Claire took Sophie for a walk around the property. The rain had washed everything clean. The air smelled of pine and wet soil. Jessie trailed behind with an old attic camera, determined to document every candid moment, though most photos ended up as blurry, mid-blink chaos. Every time the wheels of Sophie's chair bumped a stone, Claire made a dramatic whoa sound. Sophie squealed with delight. Wade watched from the porch, arms crossed, heart full. Luke joined him, orange juice in hand. "They look good out there," Luke said. "They look right out there," Wade replied. "You think she'll stay?" "I think," Wade said softly, "she already has." That night, as Claire tucked Sophie in, her daughter touched her cheek. "Ma." Claire froze. Sophie had made sounds, gestures, music, but not words. "Sweetheart," Claire whispered, falling to her knees. "Say it again." "Ma." This time clearer. Trembling with intent, Claire cradled Sophie's face. Tears spilled down her cheeks like blessings. "I'm here, baby," she sobbed. "I'm here." Downstairs, Jessie was hanging another line of paper cranes. Wade stood beside him. "She asked me today if the wishes still work," Jessie said quietly. "And what did you say?" "I told her sometimes they take a while." Jessie shrugged. "But yeah, I think they do." "Do you think she's going to leave?" Wade placed a hand on Jessie's shoulder. "Not this time." Together, they tied the final crane. In the kitchen, the letter still sat beneath the salt shaker, unread. Claire passed it as she turned off the lights. She paused, fingers grazing the edges. Then, with a steady breath, she picked it up and tore it in half. She dropped the pieces in the trash, because she didn't need a goodbye anymore. What she needed was tomorrow. Spring arrived in Montana without fanfare. No parade of blossoms. Just softened frost on the windows, birds waking early, the ground growing warm beneath their feet. And inside the Bennett home, it came the same way. Claire hummed again, not the solemn songs she once whispered in hospital rooms, but bright ones that bubbled up without warning, while folding laundry, stirring soup, cleaning crayon off the walls for the third time that day. She wasn't counting the days anymore. She was living them. Luke found part-time work at the feed store, easing back into civilian life. Jessie prepared a school project about found family, complete with drawings of them all as comic book heroes. Wade as the stoic cowboy-turned-cape wearer, Claire as a fierce-shield maiden, Sophie as a fairy with wings on wheels, Luke as a silent protector, and himself as the wisecracking narrator. Claire cried, not at the art, but at the meaning. They weren't lost pieces anymore. They were a team. One Saturday, Wade declared a real day. No errands, no appointments, no chores, he said at breakfast. Just fun. You mean fun? Claire teased, with capital letters. Jessie added, they packed a picnic. Claire made egg salad sandwiches. Wade brought lemonade and Mary Jean's oatmeal cookies. Jessie duct-taped a kite. Luke packed coffee. Claire secured Sophie's oxygen kit, and together they headed out past the ridge to a field of tall grass and wildflowers. Sophie's chair rolled through the earth as wind danced through her curls. Wade showed her how to fly the kite. Her hands gripped the string with Jessie's. She giggled like it was magic. Luke stood a short distance away, watching the scene like a man who had finally been invited back to the world. Claire stood in the tall grass and breathed deep. Wade joined her. Nice out here. She nodded. Feels like everything I didn't know I needed. Wade smiled. That's what this place does. Claire turned to him. It's not the place. Their eyes met. In the hush of that golden field, she placed her hand on his chest. I didn't believe in beginnings anymore, she whispered. But you didn't give me a new chapter. You gave me back the book. Wade cupped her face gently. And you gave me back the part of me that still believed that love wasn't something we bury. Then he kissed her. Not urgently, not perfectly, but with choice. The kind of kiss that says, I choose you. Not once, but every day after. By late afternoon, Sophie slept curled against Claire's chest, still clutching a strip of yellow kite string. Jessie built a fairy fort from sticks and wildflowers. Luke brewed coffee and handed a cup to Wade. The five of them sat in silence, watching the sun dip low. No one said anything profound. No one had to, because some miracles don't arrive with trumpets. They arrive with presence, with paper cranes, and with people who finally, *stay star. That evening, back home, Claire found a package on the porch. No name, no return address. Inside, a plain wooden frame and a note in careful cursive. But that's another story. And this one had already ended the way every heartbroken tale hopes to. Not with goodbye, but with hello again. I once saw a small wooden frame in a little shop tucked between two snow-dusted hills up north, just a forgotten corner of the world where old things find new stories. The shopkeeper didn't speak much, just rang it up and wrapped it carefully. But I remember thinking, this isn't just a gift. It's a reminder, *. Inside, handwritten note read, families aren't always born. Sometimes they're built, and sometimes they're rescued. Keep building. A friend. Claire unfolded the frame slowly, her fingers tracing the delicate edge, like she was afraid it might disappear if she looked too hard. Inside was a quote, one she had once taped beside Sophie's NICU crib during the darkest nights, when monitors beeped louder than hope. Maybe you're not lost. Maybe you're just becoming something new. She had forgotten it until now. Forgotten how much those words carried her. Claire hung the frame gently on the wall above the kitchen table, right beside Jessie's line of origami cranes, each one folded with shaky hands and a child's steadfast heart. They fluttered faintly in the evening breeze drifting through the open window, like they knew what kind of home they were guarding. Later that night, with Sophie safely tucked under her blankets and Jessie already deep in the soft breathing rhythms of sleep, Claire stepped quietly onto the porch. Wade sat on the old wooden bench, the one that creaked with time and memory. His coffee had gone cold, but he held the mug like it grounded him. Claire joined him without a word, slipping a folded piece of paper into his hand. Not the torn letter from before. A new one. One she wrote not out of fear, but out of faith. Wade read in silence, eyes moving slowly, as though the weight of each sentence demanded its own breath. Dear Wade, I'm not writing this because I'm leaving. I'm writing it because I'm staying. Because I know the storms will come again. But this time, I want you to know, I've already chosen where I'll face them from. Here, with you, with Jessie, with Luke, with Sophie. Because love isn't just a feeling. It's an address. He looked up. His eyes shimmered, glinting with something unspoken and sacred. I love you, Claire said, her voice unwavering, steady, and radiant in its simplicity. Wade didn't respond with words. He didn't need to. Instead, he stood, closed the space between them, and gently pulled her into his arms. His forehead rested against hers, and in that quiet, their hearts spoke a language far older than speech. That silence, it carried everything words couldn't hold: grief and healing, memory and hope, fear and trust. And if you had asked them, months down the road, what moment changed it all, what turned broken strangers into something that looked and felt like family, they wouldn't say it was the kiss. They wouldn't point to the rainy night or the sunny picnic, not even the framed quote or the paper cranes. They'd point to a knock, 3 slow knocks on a Sunday morning, the kind that doesn't demand, just announces. And the moment a man in uniform saw a woman at the edge of collapse, standing at a quiet crossroads in her life, and said, with a voice steady as the horizon, "You're coming with me." Because sometimes that's what redemption looks like. Sometimes that's how second chances begin. Not with fireworks, not with applause, but with one heart making room for another. If this story stirred something in you, if it reminded you that love can be found again, that broken things can be mended, then we'd love to hear from you. Wherever you are in the world, take a moment to share your voice in the comments. It's the beautiful thread that connects these stories across oceans and borders. And if you haven't already, we'd be honored to have you subscribe. Each week we share real stories, stories that echo long after the screen fades, stories that remind us all, love matters, kindness matters, and second chances, they're still out there, waiting quietly, sometimes right at your doorstep. So until next time, stay kind, stay hopeful, and never stop believing in the quiet, gentle miracles of everyday life. Let me know if you'd like a voiceover script version, a short teaser, or a YouTube description to go with this story.